Hey, good morning, everybody. Wednesday, August 12th, another Water Cooler Wednesday prepared for you. And I have to say, this one's a first, which is kind of rare. I've been around a while in the industry, over 30 years, and we purchased and traded and brokered all kinds of notes. Lottery winnings, casino winnings, professional athlete contracts, cellular phone tower leases, structured legal settlements, all kinds of stuff like that. And of course, the mainstay is real estate and trading real estate notes. So on top of that, you've got real estate notes on vacant land, real estate notes on commercial properties, residential properties, manufactured homes, mobile homes, you name it. So the first is tiny homes. I've never purchased a note on a tiny home, and I encountered this guy who's bought up several acres up on this top of this little I wouldn't say mountain, but in a mountainous area, and he specializes in putting tiny homes on there, and they're real popular in certain areas. They're affordable. They're well built. Um, it's an interesting concept, and so I'm excited to do this first deal on a tiny home. After all these years, to have something that be a first, but it's all secured with the land. It's a part of the land. Um, so it's the same as a single family home, just a tiny home. And so I guess by definition, and there might be a definition, I don't know, but I guess somewhere around 400 or 500 square feet, and but very affordable, for people, and a typical one bedroom sort of thing, and pretty cool. And I've looked at the company that built these. They've got a reputation of doing it. They specialize in this. They do it quite a bit in this area. So I'm excited about it because this could lead to other purchases as well. So it doesn't really matter. I guess that thing number one is it doesn't really matter what the collateral is as long as you can value it. That's what the important part is. So all those different cash flows that I mentioned, running from lottery winning down to a tiny home, they're all measurable as to what the value is of that. So if we can value what the collateral is, then it simply becomes a mechanism of putting in our risk expectations and then our reward expectations, and making an offer on that. And if we can make a deal, great. If we can't, it's too much of a risk, we pass. If we can't make enough of the yield, we pass. So it's a pretty simple sort of thing. So uh, let's see. Yeah, we're on there. Yeah, great. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen with you. So, as always, none of these notes are seem to be perfect. It's very, very rare that you would run into the so-called perfect note. So I just titled this one for you today, "Tiny Home, Tiny Problem." So pretty cool. There's a picture. So in addition to the tiny home on this one, the purchaser, the borrower, wanted a deck added on there. So you can see it's a nice full deck. Wanted a storage unit on there. So that was built on there. Those are extras. So they've invested more money into. So they bought the tiny home plus had the extras added to that package, which they paid cash for. So I'm always looking at that because this is a new purchase. They've only made one payment. So if we don't have a lengthy payment history, we have to look at some of the alternatives, which is, well, how much do they have invested in it? What would make it hard for them to walk away? And when you're adding these extras on there and you're paying cash for them, that certainly would be that incentive to stay and pay, as well as the down payment. So I got some other little pictures here. That's the deck being added on. You can see the interior. There's a driveway leading up to the property, a laundry room, bathroom, that sort of thing. So pretty cool. And then I encountered the first little issue on this, and this happens in a new build, especially in a kind of, I wouldn't say this is a rural area, but it's not an urban area for sure. It's kind of in between. There's plenty of houses around there, and you'll see some charts on that. But The first thing that I encountered on this was, well, it doesn't really have an address yet, at least not on public records. So there's a catch up, again, depending upon how big the county is and how fast they can get these things recorded. So the National Emergency Number Association needs to award, if you will, a number to this property so that they can put it on their mail, but also so 911, if there's an emergency it needs a response to, they can get to that property. And that's a part of it as well. So it doesn't it does have an address right now, but if you were to look this up on public records, you wouldn't be able to find it because it does not exist on Google Maps. It does not exist online. If you try to put the address in there, it simply won't show up because the county hasn't caught up to this. So that became the first thing, is like, how do I identify where this property really is? So you have to default back to parcel ID. And can I find it in the parcel ID? And boy, that was a little tricky too, because it looked like there was no access to it. There was several different sales that happened in that area. There's a couple of families on there that owned a bunch of land that they're starting to sell off, those sorts of things. So it took me a little while to figure that out. So parcel ID is your really what you should be looking for, and that requires documentation. So when I first saw the listing, of course, there's no way that I'm going to be able to locate the property, because as far as public records still concerns, and that includes Google Maps, it does not exist. So I had to get the information from the seller so I could at least get that parcel ID, which you're going to find in the legal description. So once I had the parcel ID, then I could start to jump in and identify where that property is. So I measured that up, started looking at that and comparing that to Google Maps so I can get a good read on it. So you can see it's in this treed area. And, with Google Maps, again, the house just got built, and I'm sure it doesn't take long to build these. And they just made their first payment in August. So, I mean, it's a brand new thing. But you can see the housing around the area, so it's not like it's completely isolated. And if I were to zoom out, you'll see even more housing. But you go to the mapping, you go to GIS, and you figure out, okay, there's the parcel. Okay, so now we've identified the parcel. It's getting address off of this road here. So there has to be an easement, and I have to check on the easement to make sure that these people have the ability to access the property, right? You don't want to buy something that's landlocked or just something that is favored in this where it's by the neighbor just saying, hey, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you can use that. You never want to be in that situation because the neighbors all of a sudden get in a fight and then, cut off the access to that, especially if it's gated, that sort of thing. So you want a legitimate easement in there. So that's another little thing that, I had to check on. But the address was the big thing first. And then, this access became a little minor detail as well. But I figured all that out, and I figured out all the different land that they have and where all these other tiny homes are going. So this is not going to be the only tiny home in this area, which I thought was pretty neat. They're going to be putting other ones on there, and that creates a marketplace, and that gives me the ability to look at comparable sales. Because if it was the only tiny home out there, how do you really value that other than what we call the cost approach? Right? Well, what did it cost to build it, and the what was she willing to pay for it? So between those two numbers, I would come up with a valuation number, right? So in appraisal lingo, we always looked at the comparable sales, we looked at the cost approach, and we looked at income approach, depending upon the property type. So in this case, that would be difficult, but if they have 3 or 4 other ones that are similar in square footage, similar in the time sold, and similar in prices, it does establish a market price. So if one person ends up reselling a year or two down the road, they can look back and say, well, everybody paid about $50,000 to $60,000 for these homes, depending upon the acreage. And it makes it a lot easier. It's hard to compare a tiny home to a 2,000 square foot home to a 500 square foot home or a 400 square foot home. It's hard. How do you compare that to a manufactured home? That sort of thing. So I like the idea that they came in, they bought up a chunk of land here. They're going to put several different properties on here and just divide that land up in between half acre and full acre properties. Fantastic. So that helped me out a lot. And I had to go through and really research that. Some of the information I got from the seller, but I had to put the whole picture together of what they were doing. And you do that by gathering information, again, organizing it, analyzing it, and make a decision. That's what this whole process is all about. So that's what I did. I basically pieced together the story, and the more that story came together, the better I felt about buying a brand new note on this property. So address, got that figured out, and know where it is. That'll work itself out, and eventually the county will have that on there. They do have insurance for that address. I verified that information as well. So the property is indeed insured, and that address will be it's already formally established, but it will be put on public records as well. So it just takes a little time frame there. Okay, so once that was accomplished, the next thing became, well, what are the numbers? So the numbers on this got a little confusing, and I'll explain why. So this is a very clear breakdown. I want you to look at these numbers. Purchase price 55,000. They put an earnest money down $3,000. They then put an additional $10,000 down at the closing, so they're $13,000 in, plus the deck, plus the storage, by the way. So we're just looking at what they put for the down payment here to establish how much was financed. And that was $42,000, 8.5% interest, 60 months. And you can see the monthly payments. And as I said, the payments started on August 1st, 2026. So again, you're looking at new case studies because we're in this business every single day. Okay, they paid the closing costs as well, as you can see in the bottom. So with those numbers in mind, I encountered the second error, the second mistake on this. And that was on the promissory note. So what do you notice about this promissory note versus the numbers we just went over? All I've hidden is addresses and things of that nature. So the first thing that should be pretty glaring, but it's amazing when people create these contracts and things like that, you could have five people look at this and they won't catch it because they're just going, okay, we have a note, you know. But when you're buying a note like this, you've got to examine it because what you're looking for are potential mistakes that could hurt you in the future. All right, so we were told that they bought this for $55,000, but the note was only $42,000. Well, the promissory note says $55,000 on the loan. It repeats that down here, 55,000. But also right next to that, it says 60,000. The payments are right. The starting date is correct, but those are clearly wrong numbers. Now, that might seem like something simple, right? But there's additional verbiage in here that doesn't show a clear maturity date. So if we were to buy this, the person's looking at this is what their note says, they would compare this in court to what the contract for deed says. The contract for deed is correct. The contract for deed says $42,000 on the loan with $13,000 down. The contract for deed says 8.5% interest with payments of for 60 payments of 861.69. The contract for deed is correct. That's the security instrument. But the promissory note is not. That causes conflict. So if this were to go to worst case scenario, which we always have to think about, what's a judge going to do? Could they protest this and say, well, this was wrong. That wasn't done right. We want this. Look, I still might win in a lawsuit down the road, but with issues like this, is it going to cost me more in time and money? Yes. Because you better believe if that person runs in default down the road and I have to start some legal action against them, they're going to lawyer up. And the first thing the lawyer is going to do is go, wait a minute, what is it? They didn't create this the right way. And there is potential problems down there. Again, not saying that I wouldn't win, but if you can identify problems now, get them fixed. So I went to the note seller and I said, okay, here's the problem. Now I call it tiny problems, but for me, that'd be a big problem down the road. uh, the note has clear errors, and I pointed that out. And even the guy who created this note used a software program for it. I don't know if it was him or his team, so let me clarify that. He's like, "Oh my gosh," he goes, I totally see it." He goes, "I don't know how nobody's caught it up to this point." He goes, "Because we use a software, program." He goes, "Yeah, it's clearly wrong. How would you like to fix it?" Okay, so there's a couple of ways that you can fix this. And again, it starts with state laws as such. So in this state, does a contract for deed require a promissory note? Not all states do. In this state, it doesn't require it. So we could A, just cancel this, just have a formal document where the borrower and the lender sign off and say that note is voided. Okay, and we're just relying upon the contract for deed. The other way is to do a corrective instrument. So the corrective instrument will fix all of those items. We still need both parties to sign off on those. And I asked if they could have it please notarized. Now, normally you wouldn't notarize a note, but because of the mistake, I wanted to make sure that both parties were very clear. This no longer is the proper note. There was clearly clerical mistakes here. It wasn't ill intent. It was just a clerical error. Let's fix that with this new corrective instrument. And that's what they did to match the terms of the contract for deed. So once that's corrected, great. Now the other one's voided. I have proof of that. I have a contract for deed that's recorded, that has all the proper terms on it. I have a promissory note that has been corrected and has all the proper terms on it. So we have all the consistency that we need on this. I've got proof of insurance. I've got proof of the down payments and such. So that really, for me at least, swings that scale to go, I know it's a brand new note. I know it's an untested borrower, but you know what? With the amount of money that they have invested, the way this was papered up properly, it makes sense to go ahead and proceed at a price that fits. And thankfully, both parties have agreed that the price is what we got it for. This is a live deal, so I'm not going to get into all of the details on that. So we've agreed upon a price, and we're going to move forward. And hopefully, because I like this business model, and I like the fact that this is affordable housing. I think it's attractive to certain people, and if they're building them this way and papering up the right way, and they have a track record on doing this, that's how you build a business. That's how you can start to keep going back to these same note creators, and then your inventory is never dependent upon third-party vendors or anything such as that. So pretty interesting little deal. Like I said, all these notes come with some little nuances here. So you start to chip away. And I've said this a million times. It's been replicated by the top producers in the industry. You gather information, you organize it, you analyze it, you make a decision. If that decision's to move forward, you gather more information, reorganize, reanalyze, and make another decision until you get to the closing. And that's how it works. And that's how you start to do this discovery. And as you start to gather all of that information, it solidifies your confidence in the deal. Or it doesn't, sends you the other way. And in that case, our decision is to retreat, renegotiate, or something like that in the deal. So all these minor things addressed, got it, hasn't caught up yet. Just show me another way to find the property. Great. Fix this promissory note, which clearly, again, no ill intent was on that. It's just a mistake, and that Absolutely happens. And then you find yourself with a good deal. I looked into the company. I'm sure they looked into me, and with the background, I even looked into the borrower. And she currently lives maybe 30 minutes away. So it's an area she's familiar with. And now she gets to own her own home versus, I believe, renting. So, looks good. So discovery is a part of that, and you need to learn how to identify these. So I get all the time, I get people who go, well, how do I learn? How do I learn all these? So what I just taught you is not something you're going to find in somebody's course. It's not. Because it's one of these little things that happen on this particular deal. And it's very, very difficult to put together courses that have every type of thing that can happen. So that's why what I do for my clients, I have my core curriculum, and then every other Wednesday night, I go over things such as this to continue that education. Now, on this live stream, I'm giving you a quick 20 minutes. I've got more information on this. I've got more things to show, and that's what I'll show with my clients. So they are able to keep up and learn from what seem like small things that potentially could be a big deal down the road. Because a smart investor, we're always hoping for best case scenario, which could have been, I didn't catch it on the note. It was incorrect the whole time, and the borrower just continued to pay. She paid off the whole loan. That could have happened, right? That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is it doesn't, and she runs into financial difficulty or goes into default. Now I have to take legal action. Now I've got worst case scenario lining up, because now I'm starting to see all these problems that I could have solved very simply, very easily when I bought the note. So you have to hope for best case scenario, but prepare for worst case scenario. And the best time to get something corrected, if it's on the seller's end of things, is before you close. And when you have a good seller that recognizes it, goes, missed it. Holy cow, I can't believe we did that. Our apologies. We will get that fixed right away. And they did. That's somebody you want to work with. So hope you enjoyed that quick lesson here today, and look forward to putting together another one. You want to reach out to me, Kevin at kevinshortell.com. Go to kevinshortell.com for the website. We have consulting programs. We do also personal unlimited consulting programs, educational programs, as well as my elite program, where I actually put in money in the deals with you. And I come in as a percent owner in addition to teaching you and consulting with you on everything. So check it out at kevinshortell.com. If you want a slower approach, go check out the book on Amazon, Real Estate Without Renters, and that will give you a good idea of what I teach, how I teach it. And if you like that, there's plenty of room here in the industry. So reach on out to us and get started. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that, everybody. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.